So hi everybody, it's Mel here and welcome back once again to my channel. So today's video on planning and writing an essay is part of this end of semester panic series that I have put together. All of the videos of which will be linked in the description box as much as I've uploaded to this point anyway. And you can also find them in the cards as well in the top hand corner, and they should all be linked there too. So for this video I'll be talking through my process of planning and writing an essay, but also what I'll do is I'll include a link to one of my essays that I achieved first in the description box below, just because it might be easier to kind of see an example of it all put together. But obviously as I'm going through I will include little clips of things anyway, just to kind of give you a better understanding of what it is I'm doing. So this video is probably best watched and best understood if you've watched my previous videos, which will probably include the organisation one, included the taking notes on books one, and including the taking notes on journals and articles. You'll probably just get a better grasp of how I do things if you've watched those three, but otherwise it's not entirely necessary. So I myself am in my final year of my Bachelor's of Music. So these kind of tips I think are going to be a little bit more geared towards arts and humanities subjects. I'm not really sure that they would apply to all of the different disciplines, but certainly you might find something useful from it if you're not from an arts and humanities subject. So obviously one of the most important things when it comes to planning and writing an essay is giving yourself adequate time to do so. This will differ for everybody, but basically what I'm trying to say is try not to leave everything to last minute. It's never a good idea. It can seem like a good idea to procrastinate and leave things to last minute, but yeah, generally I don't find that I work that way. I know a lot of people say, oh, I work well under pressure, but I just don't. And for me, I definitely like to make sure that my essays are of a high standard and high quality, and you can only really do that if you've looked over it with fresh eyes a couple of times, and that's not something that you can do if you've written it the night before and submitted it in the morning. So planning. Planning is one of the most important things when it comes to an essay. Do not go in dry, that's what she said. Don't just think that you can go and sit and type something and have an essay together. I don't know, I just don't think that you're going to have well structured thoughts, and it's very, very easy to ramble if you try and write an essay in that manner. So I definitely think that making a plan and having a good structure before you go in to write is very, very important. So again, at the top of the page I will put my essay title, I will put my notes from the lecturer or from the course outline and what they're expecting from this essay. I'll have got that into my head hopefully already by now, because whenever I've taken my notes that's something that I should have understood. But once again, I just want to really, really ensure that I'm bearing that in mind constantly and continuously as I write, so I can flip back and make sure that I have filled all the criteria. The most important thing is by this point you should have really, really been able to unpack the question, find out what the essay question is really, really asking you, even underlining the most important words within it, and really, really know what it is you're trying to get out of that essay. So I will include a little example of sort of a structure that I do here. Now again, this is something that is different for everybody. I like to have this really linear laid out structure, but obviously for some people they like kind of thought bubbles and brainstorming and all that kind of thing. That does not work for me at all. I've tried that way and it just really, really doesn't happen. So this is the way that I definitely find works best for me, but again it may not necessarily work for you. You just kind of have to try it and find out. So I'll include in this plan, in this structure, is I'll obviously have laid out what way I'm going to do things. So I'll write introduction, underneath I'll have the main points, and beside these I'll maybe include scholars that I want to talk about. I'll maybe include quotes in here. Sometimes you can see in brackets I've put the scholars, and that's because I'm relating it to a quote or a page number from my notes, which again you'll kind of understand the reasons why I do that if you've watched how I take notes. So I'll place the quotes that I'm going to be using to back up my argument in here, just so that they're handy to get to. Now conclusion, you kind of should be able to put your main points of your conclusion in here, and before you even get around to writing your essay you should kind of already know what your conclusion is going to be. You should already know what you're working towards. So at this point you should actually really, really be able to do your conclusion. I don't often do it, but I'll definitely have the main points of what I'm trying to get to written here in this plan. Some people actually even prefer, and I would do it sometimes, to not even write an introduction whenever you go into actually writing the essay itself, but to leave that at the end, because your introduction is really going to be a summary of what you explore throughout the essay, and sometimes you don't really know what way that's going to look until you've done it. If you do have a really good structure, then it should be easy enough to do, but otherwise you can leave it to the end whenever it comes to writing the essay itself. So when it comes to actually writing the essay itself, this should be quite easy if you've already got a really good plan and structure, as your main points will be there. You just need to develop them and develop it eloquently. So one of the most important things when it comes to an essay is referencing. Be sure that you're using the referencing system that you've been directed to use, whether that's by your course or your lecturer, etc. I know in some circumstances, certainly in my course, we're not directed to use a specific one, so I would always go towards Harvard referencing. It's just what I've always used, what I'm used to, what I know, and what I know I can do really well, so I tend to stick to that. But one of the most important things is, if you have the freedom to pick one, is to make sure that you pick one and stick with it. Do not change halfway through, referencing in a different manner. Do not mix up referencing system. Make sure that you know what referencing system that you're using, you know how to use it, and that you're using it correctly. So like I said, I use Harvard referencing system. Again, that link to my essay will be somewhere in the description box there, so you can hunt that out and kind of see it in effect. So one thing when it comes to referencing that I've heard a lot is people worry that they're over-referencing. You cannot over-reference. If you think that you're over-referencing and you take some out to try and skim it back again, then really what you're doing is plagiarizing, and that's just a terrible idea and a route that you don't want to go down. So even if it's some cases, like in essays I've written, there'll be references after nearly every sentence, that's okay, because those ideas are not mine and this is the appropriate way to deal with them. Now, I'll also be leaving a link to your reference generator. I know a lot of people use these when it comes to writing essays. I would say, however, if you are going to use them, be very, very careful. Check over it and make sure that it's done it correctly. Don't just take the computer's word for it, because I have known sometimes these generators go a little bit skew with and they don't work correctly and it doesn't come out correctly. So do be very, very careful if you're going down the route of using reference generators, whether that's for in-text referencing or for your bibliography at the end. So when it comes to writing an essay, one of the main things that you're trying to do is to show that you have engaged and, importantly, understood the materials that you've gathered to get this together. Be sure whenever you're putting quotes and things in your article, you're not just kind of regurgitating them, you're showing that you've taken something from them, you've understood them, and you're actually working the quotes into your work, not working your work around the quote. Another thing is that no matter what you're saying in an essay, you need to back it up. So everything you say, you need to explain it. And one thing that I find really, really helpful, that I kind of take paragraph by paragraph, is peeing all over my essay. Now that might sound a little bit strange, but the P method is to make your point, provide evidence to your point, and to explain it. And this is something that I've actually used since I was in secondary school. It was one of my English teachers taught me this, was the P method. So point, evidence, explain. Show your point, show your evidence for this point, and explain it. So up until this point, kind of depending on your sentence structure, your grammar, your spelling, which are all things that you're going to go through when you're proofreading, the next part of the series is actually going to be on proofreading, then you should sort of be sitting on a 2-1 if you've done everything well, if you've provided good points, if you've explained them well, if you've provided good evidence, if you've really engaged and understood the course materials. So what lecturers on my course have said to me that they're looking for a first, or for an essay of a really, really high standard and quality, is for very well executed original opinions which are based on well researched materials. So it's having taken all the knowledge that you've gained from your note-taking process, your note gathering process, and getting something new out of it, getting something original out of it, but that you can again back up, which is very, very important. So in the essay example I've provided, I think I've actually done some original analysis of a little piece of music, something like that, but this is something that you can even do throughout the essay, is kind of throw in your own little ideas, your own little opinions. Sometimes I'll throw in a little question if I have one, because it's important to show that you're really engaging with the material and that you're really thinking about it. Now again, like I said earlier, some people like to leave their introduction to the end, so just be sure that with an essay you have a really strong introduction. It's very clear what you're going to be doing within the essay, and in academic essays I really tend to avoid using things like I and we. I just don't think that that looks good within an essay, so again, that's something that you'll see that I don't do. And again, as I said at the start, it is so important to leave adequate time and space away from your essay in order to go back and proofread it and to be sure that you've done everything right. Also ensure that you've included your header if you have one of those. I always put my student number and name in the header, and page numbers as well, because that's something that I've been caught out on, as well as formatting. So if you've the appropriate line spacing put in, things like that. Now the bibliography is one of the most important things. Make sure that you put in everything you've referenced in the main body of your text, no matter what this may be, so everything goes in here. I personally break my bibliography down often to bibliography, videography, discography, but there are people who like to break it down even further. Like for example, in my bibliography I will include online journals and articles, but some people like to have a separate section for these. Again, ensure that your layout conforms to your selected referencing system, whatever that may be. Again, in my example, this is Harvard referencing, so you'll get to have a little look at that. So hopefully some of these tips and ideas will help you. I certainly find that they help me. It's stuff that I bear in mind whenever I'm writing. And yeah, so the next video we will be talking about proofreading. So thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you on the next upload. Bye!
I'll raise a glass to you, and you'll raise a glass to me.